Today I present another case, the story of Mauricio Schoklender and Cristina Silva Romano. When they first met, neither could have anticipated that their romance would drastically alter both of their lives. Mauricio was an industrial engineer, while Cristina was a theater enthusiast brimming with dreams. They were both young when they crossed paths on January 11, 1955, in a downtown cafe in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Mauricio came from a middle-class Jewish family, whereas Cristina was Catholic, a fact that disapproved of by Mauricio's mother. Despite opposition, the couple remained undeterred. They continued their courtship and married civilly on July 7th of that year, skipping the religious ceremony to resolve familial disputes. The newlyweds moved to Tandil, Buenos Aires, where Mauricio secured a position at the metallurgical company Tandil S.A. Initially, they lived modestly in a boarding house, but their situation gradually improved. As they settled into their new life, they began planning to expand their family. Their first child, Sergio Mauricio, was born on May 30th, 1958, followed by their second son, Pablo Guillermo, on February 6, 1961. In 1963, they welcomed their only daughter, Ana Valeria. Cristina was known for her theatrical flair and love for literature. She often boasted about her knowledge in her studies in dance and theater. While she was strict about academic achievements and the importance of reading, especially classic literature, she struggled with other aspects of motherhood. In Tandil, Cristina hosted literary gatherings at their home, but some neighbors recalled that the Schoklender residence was often untidy and disorganized. The general consensus was that Cristina was often distracted by alcohol and would leave the children alone at home. The local memories of Mauricio during that period were predominantly positive, especially from those who worked for him. Life in Tandil was generally happy, with the children attending school. Mauricio had secured a managerial position at the metallurgical Tandil, and Cristina was an actress in the emerging theater scene. However, their stay in Tandil was not permanent, as new opportunities emerged for Mauricio. By 1968, Mauricio was presented with new job prospects in the capital city. He began working for the Pittsburgh and Cardiff Coal Group, a limited liability company. The family relocated to Buenos Aires, settling in an apartment on the 4th floor of 1483 de Febrero Street in Belgrano. The Pittsburgh Group was a large conglomerate of companies in Argentina, owned by the German tycoon Carlos Junger Bartolom Gande, with 25% ownership by the German company August Thyssen AG, one of the world's largest steel producers. The children were still young when they moved to Buenos Aires, and the family's routine seemed typical for the time: a provider father, children attending school and achieving good grades, and a mother managing the household, even if it meant deferring her dreams of fame and success. Mauricio not only maintained a stable job but also advanced within the industrial conglomerate, whose activities were at one point associated with the manufacture of military equipment. According to Argentine newspapers, this controversial aspect of Mauricio's professional life was kept out of the public eye, revealing that the Schoklender home harbored more secrets. As previously mentioned, neighbors in Tandil noted that Cristina was not only histrionic but also struggled with alcohol addiction. According to later statements from her sons Pablo and Sergio, her drinking problem worsened over time, bringing with it increasingly inappropriate behaviors, particularly towards her children. Despite these issues, no one spoke openly about them. Pittsburgh, where Mauricio became a manager, was rumored to be an intermediary for the German company Thyssen in the sale of a nuclear submarine and 10 aircraft to Augusto Pinochet, the Chilean military dictator who ruled for over a decade. Media reports also indicated that the company, during the dictatorship known as the National Reorganization Process 1976–1973, engaged in significant business deals under the protection of the military regime. These deals included the transfer of technology for tank and submarine factories, as well as licenses to build corvettes and submarines. The multi-million-dollar deal allegedly involved not only licenses for constructing tanks, corvettes, and submarines, but also the acquisition of 2 submarines and 4 destroyer frigates manufactured in Germany. While Mauricio's precise role in these transactions was not clearly defined, it was suggested that his ascent within the conglomerate was due to his status as a trusted individual and his presumed knowledge of its operations. Mauricio's professional advancement appeared to contrast sharply with the instability at home. The family's dysfunction became increasingly apparent as the children grew older. According to Sergio and Pablo, Cristina's issues extended beyond alcohol to other substances. When disinhibited, she disregarded all limits. Her children reported that Cristina engaged in reprehensible behaviors and seemed to develop a disturbing fixation on Pablo from the age of 12. She overwhelmed him with explicit details about her lovers and even intruded into his bed. Some people who knew Cristina very well assured that she was sexually abused by her father at the age of 12, and that is why she repeated the story with Pablo Hero as she grew up. The situation with Pablo deteriorated as Cristina's behavior became increasingly erratic. She sought to establish an inappropriate relationship with him, often showing contempt during the day while pursuing him inappropriately at night. Cristina's nightly consumption typically involved a bottle of wine, half a bottle of whiskey, and several more glasses of wine, often accompanied by pills. Mauricio's awareness of these issues was questioned by many media outlets, and the responses from his children were as shocking as the revelations themselves. Mauricio was rumored to be homosexual, a fact that, in the conservative Argentina of the time, could have exposed him to public ridicule. Despite the unhappy marriage, he endured his wife's mockery, numerous lovers, and the unhappiness of his children, all while maintaining his secret. The toxic family environment forged an exceptionally strong bond between the brothers. Pablo saw Sergio as a father figure and believed they could even communicate telepathically. They reportedly shared the same dreams about the family's impending crisis. By 1981, Mauricio had arranged for Sergio to work at Pittsburgh, where he performed well. However, the family's dysfunction had become glaringly obvious, with Pablo having numerous clashes with his parents. While outward appearances masked the turmoil within the household, a series of troubling events unfolded in May. On May 15th, Sergio allegedly stole money and documents from his father, but he also reported to Pittsburgh authorities that someone had locked him in a cold storage room with the intent to kill him. That same night, a fire broke out in Mauricio and Cristina's room. Although the couple was unharmed, their bedroom and hallway were severely damaged, and the original electrical connections of the apartment were affected. The parents attributed the fire to Sergio, accusing him of sprinkling fuel on the floor and igniting it. As a result of the increasing tension in the home, Pablo was expelled on May 18th, after a violent confrontation with his mother, during which she hit him and caused injuries. The expulsion also stemmed from Mauricio's interest in having the insurance company cover the losses from the fire. When an expert was sent to assess the damage, Pablo made inappropriate comments, complicating the situation further. Ultimately, the expert determined that the fire was caused by a cigarette, and Pablo was found to have no connection to the incident. Pablo moved to the Normandy Hotel amid the family conflict, while Mauricio achieved a new professional milestone by being appointed president of LaMa, one of the main companies in the Pittsburgh group, on May 29th. To celebrate the promotion and their eldest son's birthday, the family decided to go for a stroll along the waterfront and have dinner at a local establishment, rather than having a lavish celebration. On the night of May 30th, after dinner, Sergio left before his parents. Upon returning to the family apartment, he was surprised to find Pablo there. The brothers discussed the dysfunctionality of their family and the facade of a happy life they presented to others. According to some reports, the brothers' meeting was not a coincidence but part of a sinister conspiracy. Around 3 a.m., Mauricio, Cristina, and Ana Valeria returned home. Cristina stopped to pour herself a whiskey, and at that moment, Pablo attacked her, unleashing all his accumulated resentment over the alleged abuse. Pablo struck her in the head with a 30 cm long and 3 cm diameter metal bar, knocking her unconscious. Sergio then wrapped a piece of clothing around his mother's neck and strangled her until she stopped breathing. 2 hours later, the brothers attacked Mauricio while he was asleep. They used the same metal bar to hit him and also strangled him. The brothers then covered their parents' heads with towels and plastic bags to avoid leaving blood traces and wrapped the bodies in sheets. They transported the bodies down the elevator to the garage, with the father's body being the first to be moved. The first body they removed was Cristina's, and the second was Mauricio's. Both were placed in the trunk of a Dodge Polara, one of the family's cars. The doorman noticed the unusual activity of the young men at that hour, as well as the packages they loaded into the car, and questioned them directly about what was happening. Pablo did not respond, while Sergio replied cryptically that the doorman would learn more from the newspapers. The doorman did not think much of the enigmatic answer at the time, but later understood its significance. After placing the bodies in the car, the brothers returned to the house to clean up and eliminate any traces. They collected all blood-stained clothes and put them in a brown bag to dispose of them. Early that morning, as they left for the North neighborhood, some police officers on the street made Pablo very nervous. He chose to separate from his brother, getting out of the car and walking away, while Sergio stayed behind the wheel. Sergio parked the car in front of a park at 6:45 a.m., planning to return later to set it on fire and destroy the evidence. Before doing so, the brothers needed to resolve other issues, including a financial one. They approached Andres Horvath, a co-worker of Mauricio's, and requested a substantial sum of 12,500 pesos, equivalent to $25,000 at that time. They told Andres that their father was in trouble, and without asking further questions, he gave them the money. Unbeknownst to Andres, this money was intended to aid Sergio and Pablo in their escape. Meanwhile, as the bodies began to drain fluids, a red trickle of blood started to leak from the trunk of the car. The next morning, children playing in front of Las Heras Park noticed the dark, bloody liquid seeping from the car's trunk. They informed their parents, who then contacted the police. 5 patrol cars arrived at the scene and confirmed the blood flow. Shortly afterward, 3 tow trucks and 2 fire trucks appeared, and the area was cordoned off to prevent journalists and photographers from entering. The police, after struggling for hours to open the car trunk, had to call in the explosives brigade. The trunk was blown open with a detonator, revealing the bodies of a man and a woman inside. The bodies found in the trunk were identified as Mauricio Schoklender and his wife, Cristina Silva. The police immediately attempted to contact the Schoklender household but preferred not to deliver such terrible news over the phone. When Pablo answered, he was told to come to the police station due to an accident involving his parents. He promised to come right away, but hours passed with no arrival from the family. Sergio and Pablo had misled Ana Valeria, who was puzzled by the absence of her parents. The brothers spent what appeared to be a normal morning, but the police call reminded them of their dire situation, leading them to believe it was only a matter of time before they were pursued. The brothers fled Buenos Aires in another family car, dined at a restaurant on Montevideo Street, and then took a cab to Mar del Plata. They checked into the Grand Hotel Dora, where Pablo registered under a false identity as Pablo Fogel. Meanwhile, Sergio attempted to rent a twin-engine plane from the local aero club, aiming to escape to Brazil, but the owner was unavailable. Sergio returned to the hotel where he and Pablo watched news reports about the discovery of the bodies. The next day, Sergio revisited the aero club, only to be informed that customs clearance would be required before takeoff. This risk of detection led them to abandon their escape plan. The absence of the brothers from the police station made them the prime suspects. Investigators sought to understand their motives and whereabouts, summoning those close to the family for questioning. First to testify were Pablo's girlfriend, Nancy Peel, and Sergio's girlfriend, Juana, last name not disclosed. Both women were interrogated separately and provided consistent accounts. They stated that on May 30th, they had lunch with Pablo at a restaurant, noting that at that time Pablo was staying at a hotel. They then went to the Schoklender's house in Belgrano. Since Mauricio and Cristina were not there, Pablo and his girlfriend took a nap in a room, while Sergio and his girlfriend prepared a birthday cake in the kitchen. Everything seemed normal until the celebration began, at which point the phone rang, and the group received a call from the police. Sergio and Pablo decided to accompany the girls to the nearest bus stop, which was the last time they saw each other in person. Ana Valeria, the younger sister of Sergio and Pablo, was also questioned by the police and was cleared of suspicion. The building manager was summoned for questioning and shared his impressions of the Schoklender's family, describing them as a model family. He noted that Sergio, the eldest son, resembled his father while Pablo was more playful. According to him, the family was very close-knit, and Mauricio was always greeted or seen off with hugs from his children. As the investigation continued, Sergio and Pablo seemed to be enacting a bizarre escape plan, reminiscent of scenes from Western movies featuring rugged cowboys on horseback. They devised a strange scheme that remains unclear to this day. During their stay at the Mar del Plata hotel under false identities, the brothers contacted the publicist Abraham Vinsky. They claimed to represent the Volser nautical industry and needed to launch a new line of boats. They requested 4 models, 2 men and 2 women for a promotional dinner and advertising campaign. However, when Abraham arrived at the hotel with the models the next day, the brothers had already departed. The case continued to dominate newspaper headlines, with sensationalist coverage referring to them as jackals in the shadows or soulless killers, emphasizing their heinous act of murdering their parents. The media exposure led them to decide to split up. Pablo and Sergio accidentally encountered each other on San Martin Pedestrian Street in Mar del Plata. They exchanged no words or gestures, blending into the crowd despite being the most wanted men in Argentina at that time. Each then continued their separate paths. Pablo boarded a bus bound for the province of Tucumán, planning to cross into Bolivia. Sergio, meanwhile, planned to return to Buenos Aires. He spent the night with a woman found by a cab driver at a couple's hotel called Somos Dos, located on Route 2, on the outskirts of Mar del Plata. There are differing accounts of this night. Some say he spent it with a woman, while others suggest he merely sought her company to meet hotel requirements and fell asleep from exhaustion. The next day, Sergio bought Goco clothes, riding boots, and a horse. He traveled from Camet to the town of Cobo, 30 km from Mar del Plata, attempting to adopt the style of a cowboy from the far west. However, as someone more accustomed to city life, the lengthy horseback ride proved exhausting. Tired from the journey, he sought lodging and food at an establishment called the Old Store. At the Old Store, Sergio ordered a milanesa sandwich and had a few drinks. He spoke too freely, which led the owner and an employee to recognize him. They subdued him, beat him, tied him up, and locked him in a shed while they intermittently called the police. They removed his gag and interrogated him as if they were expert detectives, repeatedly asking him why he had killed his parents. Despite their efforts, when no police arrived, one of them went to Route 2 to flag down a patrol car. However, during this moment of distraction, Sergio managed to escape. The owner of the establishment, believing it was a devilish trick, thought that Sergio was like the legendary escape artist Houdini. When the police finally arrived, Sergio had already crawled through the pastures and fled in a crazed state. According to his later account in a book about his life, he continued running on foot until he was exhausted and spent the night by a creek. At dawn, his only hope of continuing his journey was to hitch a ride from a kindly driver who did not recognize him. However, his optimism was dashed when he saw a police patrol vehicle approaching. At 4:30 a.m., On June 4th, Sergio was apprehended by the police. He was imprisoned from 1981 to 1983 in Caseros prison before being transferred to Devoto prison. Meanwhile, Pablo, who had also planned an escape, was arrested in Ranchilos, Tucumán, far from the Bolivian border he had intended to reach. In his initial statement as a detainee, Sergio took full responsibility for the murders and absolved Pablo of any guilt. He claimed that the motive behind the attack was his mother's alcoholism and pill addiction. Sergio explained that when his mother lost control, she made inappropriate sexual advances toward Pablo. On the day of the incident, her behavior was no exception, prompting Pablo to defend himself and strike her. According to Sergio, he then suffocated her. When Mauricio attacked Pablo, Sergio used the same method of suffocation on his father to protect his younger brother. The details of the capture and confession were leaked to the media, albeit with some inaccuracies, leading to various speculations about the events. Clarín, a leading Argentine newspaper, questioned several aspects of the case, presenting 6 main points of skepticism. They found it astonishing that Sergio could have killed his parents alone without any accomplice. Neutralizing Mauricio, who was physically strong and 175 cm tall, seemed challenging. Taking his mother's life without her screaming for help in a typically quiet neighborhood was considered difficult. The idea of involving Pablo and placing the bodies in the trunk of the car seemed implausible. Driving the car to Coronel Diaz Street and abandoning it in a busy area without being seen was questioned. The decision for both brothers to flee together rather than separately was deemed suspicious. The case, which shocked the public, prompted varying theories as family secrets were exposed. Sergio's account evolved over time, but he consistently maintained that his mother's abuse of Pablo was a key motive. Despite the media frenzy, detailed aspects of the trial start, including witness testimonies, evidence, and arguments from both prosecution and defense, were not widely reported. Sergio and Pablo's girlfriends were called to testify, corroborating their previous statements about spending time with the brothers on May 30th without knowing about their parents' fate. They had last seen the brothers at the bus stop, and the next thing they knew, the case was making headlines. The defense lawyer argued that the brothers were innocent and suggested that the murders were related to arms trafficking involving powerful military sectors. According to this version, Mauricio and Cristina had been involved in shady dealings and had even received threats from Brazilian criminals, who were allegedly responsible for the attack. Before the crime, Sergio was kidnapped by unknown individuals who hooded him, put him in a car, and beat him while telling him that if he provided information about his father, they would take his life. In his new account of the night of the crime, Sergio stated that he saw 3 men holding Pablo and then stumbled upon a lump that turned out to be his mother. One of the men, the only one in the group who spoke Spanish, told him that he had nothing against them but that they were carrying out orders from higher up. They also sprayed Ana Valeria with anesthetic gas to make her unconscious and prevent her from witnessing the events. An interesting fact revealed in court was that the autopsy of the victims showed the presence of plankton in Mauricio's lungs. This microorganism only appears when someone drowns in the sea or a river, which was strange given that it was claimed his life was taken with a hot iron. This fueled further speculation about motives unrelated to family dynamics as the cause of the double crime. Another relevant piece of information was the death, 2 weeks after the fatal attack on the Schoklenders, of Julio José de la Oa, another manager of their company, in a strange accident on his terrace, which was never sufficiently clarified and was thought by many to be possibly linked to what happened to the Schoklenders. The judicial process was very lengthy, and during that time, one of the alleged perpetrators pointed out by Sergio declared his responsibility for the deaths of the Schoklenders, claiming that the couple's children had been threatened to incriminate them. Although the man was involved in arms sales in the Brazilian Navy, many suspected that this testimony had been bought by the brothers. On March 12, 1985, Judge Marta Lopardo dismissed the defense and sentenced Sergio to life imprisonment for the crime of murder aggravated by familial relationship. Pablo was acquitted because his brother assumed all responsibility. After the verdict, Pablo left the court in tears, expressing his gratitude to his brother. For days, little was said about the particular relationship in which Sergio was Pablo's protector. Pablo's lawyer appealed the verdict, but the result was unfavorable. In the case review, Sergio's sentence was upheld, and on July 7, 1985, the National Chamber of Appeals in Criminal and Correctional Matters revoked the previous sentence and sentenced Pablo to life imprisonment as well, declaring him a co-author of the same crimes as Sergio. The ruling stated that Pablo was the mastermind behind the 2 crimes. Pablo was deemed the mastermind behind the 2 crimes, particularly the murder of his mother, motivated by her drunken sexual advances. The appeals court judges also highlighted Sergio's tendency to fabricate details, noting that after 2 years he retracted his confession and attempted to convince the judges of their innocence at the time of the new ruling. Pablo did not go to prison immediately following the new ruling because he had fled to Bolivia under the false identity of Walter Sandoval and settled in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, where he even started a family. However, on May 14, 1994, the Bolivian police arrested him, initially identifying him as Jorge Velázquez, an Argentine citizen. When his fingerprints were sent to Interpol, it was discovered that Jorge was actually Pablo. He was then handed over to a police commission that transported him back to Buenos Aires. Once in Argentina, Pablo refused to testify and went directly to prison to serve his sentence. In prison, he was subjected to mistreatment by other inmates and wrote a book, Yo Pablo Schoklender, detailing his version of the story. In the book, he portrayed Sergio as a heroic figure, describing him as a father, protector, and brother. At the end of the book, Pablo wrote a letter to Sergio, emphasizing how much he needed his brother to stay behind bars. Sergio's prison experience was quite different from Pablo's. He also wrote a book titled Esta es mi verdad, in which he revealed dark secrets about his parents. He described Cristina as someone who abused amphetamines, drank heavily, harassed Pablo, had multiple lovers, and humiliated her husband, accusing him of being homosexual. Sergio also suggested that his father might have been involved with his secretary, though he was always discreet about it. Sergio dedicated many pages to the alleged attack by his father's enemies due to his work, but this did not gain him additional credibility or lead to a reduction in his sentence. Cristina's mother, after reading the allegations about her daughter from her grandchildren, gave an interview to Gente magazine, affirming that while it was true her daughter drank a lot of Washtrer, Sergio always preferred a healthy lifestyle and behaved like a father figure to Pablo and Ana Valeria. His grandmother recalled that Sergio had become distant after a trip to the missions and that he seemed to be searching for a spiritual path and a way to help the less fortunate. She noted that he wanted to invent and build, and that despite their good nature as children, their parents would punish them for trivial matters. She believed that over time something or someone had influenced them negatively. Sergio's true talent, according to his grandmother, lay in his ability to make innovative and successful proposals, and he utilized his time in prison effectively by pursuing academic studies. He earned degrees in law and psychology and founded the Centro Universitario de Devoto, which served as a model for other prisons. However, his management was criticized by Archimedes Pucho, a notorious criminal who considered Sergio a shameless traitor and a profiteer. During his incarceration, Sergio met Eva de Bonafini, one of the founders of the Madriz de Plaza de Mayo, who visited political prisoners. They formed a close friendship, and Eva began to visit him regularly. Later, while imprisoned in Caseros, Sergio met Viviana Sala, a psychiatrist, in 1994. He pursued her affection by sending her roses and developed a romantic relationship. After 14 years in prison, Sergio was paroled on November 28, 1995, having served 2/3 of his sentence. Eva, who had become a mother figure to him, was there to welcome him upon his release. Sergio publicly acknowledged Eva as a maternal figure who filled an emotional void in his life. She took him into her home, leading to what some media described as a symbiotic relationship between a son without a mother and a mother without a son. Sergio started a new chapter in his life working for the Madriz de Plaza de Mayo organization, which included designing a notable housing project for impoverished citizens. 3 years after his release, he married Viviana Sala, describing her as not only beautiful but also highly intelligent and a successful psychiatrist. Viviana Sala, a specialist in psycho-oncology and psychopharmacology with numerous master's degrees that Sergio claimed were too many to even list, married him 3 years after his release. Despite his successful career and reputation, the blending of love and business did not always go smoothly. By May 2001, Pablo began to obtain work permits, and both brothers started working for the Madriz de Plaza de Mayo organization, which had created the Sueños Compartidos Shared Dreams Foundation. However, the foundation's work, which involved building homes with state subsidies, encountered serious issues. Sergio, as the legal representative of the organization, allegedly became a multimillionaire while more than 200 million pesos disappeared from the public funds meant for housing the poor. In 2011, Sergio faced new legal troubles. He was charged with illicit enrichment, money laundering, and defrauding the state due to the diversion of public funds allocated to the Sueños Compartidos project. The whistleblower was Eve de Bonafini herself. In retaliation, Sergio told journalist Martin Capapras that the Madriz de Plaza de Mayo Foundation had allegedly financed itself through robberies of businesses and supermarkets. He claimed that during Carlos Menem's presidency, the organization had planned armed struggle and stored weapons, including machine guns, grenades, and explosives at their university. Sergio further alleged that between 1999 and 2000 they had prepared to kidnap Emilio Mashura, a claim arising from Eve's own accusations. The justice system ordered investigations into Sergio's assets, including numerous companies, mansions, country houses, boats, airplanes, and even a Ferrari, suspecting they were bought with funds from the Sueños Compartidos project. Sergio, however, insisted that these assets were purchased with the income of his wife, the distinguished psychiatrist Viviana Sala. Despite his claims, Eve eventually expelled him, accusing him of fraud and theft. Sergio countered by blaming Eve for the embezzlement and sought to protect himself by leveraging his established reputation. In 2013, Sergio and Pablo, who had been detained for 3 months due to an investigation, were ultimately prosecuted along with Eve de Bonafini and high-profile former Kirchnerist officials such as Julio DeVito and Josa Lopez for their involvement in the scandal. While it might seem that the Schoklender brothers' story should have ended there, it did not. Every anniversary of the double murder of their parents reignites media coverage in Argentina, bringing the case back into the public eye. Sergio, despite his reluctance to discuss his parents' murder, continued to make controversial statements that kept him in the spotlight. In 2016, during a dinner with 2 journalists in Rosario, Sergio spoke animatedly about his experiences in politics, his travels and meetings with prominent figures such as Nestor Kirchner, Fidel Castro, and Hugo Chavez. When one journalist abruptly asked him if he had been involved in his parents' death, Sergio, although surprised, responded that besides the crime he was convicted for, he had accomplished many other things, including the creation of the Devoto University Center and political activism. He claimed that his efforts to aid the needy and his role in fostering relationships with international figures were often overlooked because of his past actions, for which he had already served his sentence. Sergio expressed frustration that despite his efforts to contribute positively to society, he was still labeled as a parasite and his past actions continued to overshadow his achievements. He lamented that conspiracy theories about his case persisted, despite the fact that the double murder had been judged and those responsible had been sentenced. The case remains controversial and debated. Forensic psychiatrist Mariano Castex, who met Pablo in prison, questioned many elements of the trial. He noted discrepancies, such as the autopsy findings which indicated that the weapon used to harm the victims was not the bar the brothers claimed. Castex, who had extensive contact with Pablo, described him as a sensitive individual who had endured significant suffering in prison. The case's details continue to be scrutinized, with questions still lingering about the true nature of Mauricio's profession and the full extent of the events surrounding the Schoklender family's tragedy. There were speculations regarding the potential involvement of an arms manufacturer in the Schoklender case. If this were true, it could imply that the Schoklender children might have been victims of a dark scheme. Questions arose about why 2 middle-class young men with resources would commit such a high-profile crime clumsily and handle the aftermath with equal ineptitude. The brothers' actions seemed to contradict their privileged status, leading to doubts about the true nature of their motives. While awaiting the oral trial for the Sueños Compartidos case, Sergio lived in Perez, Santa Fe, and worked as a master builder in 2021. He had a daughter, Madeline Camille, born in Tucumán, whose existence he only acknowledged 11 years after her birth. The confirmation came through a positive DNA test. Madeline carries her mother's surname, Belenschna, whom Sergio met when he went to present a book in the province. Pablo, who had settled in Paraguay, also worked in construction and socially used his second surname, Serva. His younger sister, Ana Valeria, who had no connection to the attack on their parents, chose to remain completely out of the media's view. One of her first actions was to change her last name to make it harder to locate her. She also contested the inheritance rights of her siblings. Ana Valeria converted to Catholicism, married, and had 2 children. The remains of Mauricio and Cristina Schoklender were buried in Section 15 of the Chacarita Cemetery. Over time, as per mortuary laws, their graves were elevated, and the remains were moved to a common ossuary, particularly after the Schoklender brothers faced accusations of embezzlement. The brothers eventually fell out and never reconciled. They ceased to give interviews about their parents' crime, and when asked, they stated that they had complied with the justice system and had nothing further to contribute to the case. In mid-2023, Sergio Schoklender took legal action against the Argentine national government, filing an amparo petition to contest his life sentence for the murder of his parents. He argued that continuing to report his conviction, despite the time elapsed since the sentence was handed down, infringed upon his rights to dignity and privacy. He contended that it was unfair that anyone could access a report detailing his past conviction, particularly when the court that issued the sentence no longer existed. Sergio claimed that while his criminal record was clear when requested for most procedures, data from his old conviction inexplicably reappeared in 2023. He expressed frustration at why, even after so many years, people remained interested in his past crimes. To conclude, we'll leave you with a poignant quote from Pablo Schoklender's letter to his mother at the end of his book, Mom. I never came to love you. Thank you for joining us for this investigation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's case. Your opinions are important to us, so please share them with the utmost respect for the victims, other viewers, and us. Remember to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video if you think someone might be interested. Until next time, goodbye.